In this very special episode of Yoga Rebels, we talk about brain injuries, dementia, and Jonesy the cat. Tapas is one of the niyamas, right? Yes, one of the niyamas, and it means heat. Mm-hmm. However, a lot of times when you're talking about tapas, you're talking, and this is not the little food dishes that you share.
I know, I was thinking that too.
Yeah.
It's like, let's just get some small plates.
Yeah, it's not small plates. I, just as a side note, I don't share food.
I don't either. I'm very aggressive.
I don't do tapas. Like, this is my small plate, that's your small plate. But this conversation about tapas is about sitting with discomfort for the most part, and then how sitting with discomfort, and we say that a lot, so I think it would also be good to talk about what the hell that means.
Yeah, what do we mean by discomfort?
Sit with your discomfort. It's like breathing into your hip. What the hell does that mean?
I can feel it.
Yeah. But also how that can help build character and strength emotionally, physically, and so forth. So,
right, like your self-discipline.
Yeah.
Which I think in terms of yoga, when they say self-discipline, it could be very easy to think that means meditating for like 20 hours a day and sitting on top of a mountain and,
I mean, good on you if you can do that.
Fasting, for however many minutes I can fast.
Yeah.
But that is, I think, just like anything else, the yamas and the niyamas were written by, I think, people,
I think
compiled, a really long time ago. So they met the needs of a certain type of people at a certain time, and we can look at that and see what it means to us now. So, like, what do we mean by self-discipline? What do we mean by sitting with discomfort? Because while it might have meant at some point, or to some people, sitting on a mountaintop and, meditating for an entire day in the cold, that's not realistic for most people.
Yeah,
So-
and I think that's a good point. Like, the discomfort it's relative and it changes and it's different for each person.
Right.
Culture has a big impact on what we're even talking about.
Right, like we were talking a little bit about, like, in terms of self-discipline, for somebody in the West, in America, might mean doing everything by yourself.
Yeah.
Being, that idea of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and being an individual and doing everything for yourself, whereas most other communities, whether they're Eastern or African or wherever else, center around community. So part of your self-discipline or your discipline includes asking for help or just that built-in help of community. So we're kind of trying to find our place within that too, as Americans who practice yoga. The ideas of being an individual, doing everything on your own, but then that doesn't really fit in with yoga or the concepts of yoga either. The idea that we do need community, we do need to help each other, and that is actually a really strong and brave thing to do, at this point at least, just because culturally it's not built in to do those things.
Yeah, right. And I think that one of the things that, and we're gonna actually share some of our own personal stories that relate to this. But one of the things I want to say before we get into the personal stories was just in general, I think that this discussion is really important to the types of people that we're hoping are watching. People who are introverts, people who are part of the counterculture or the nerddom and so forth. Because, I think when we talk about discomfort, there are a lot of different things that can fall into that. So this is not my personal story, but my personal example of just finding discomfort or finding comfort from watching movies that I feel like I can relate to that.
Right.
Finding characters like Ahsoka. I actually really relate to Kanan Jarrus of Rebels, and everybody has their favorite characters because it makes you feel like I see myself in that person.
Yeah.
I can relate, but then also, there's a lot of discomfort that you might find in, although this group I know is a group of people that love the same thing I do. If you go to a Star Wars convention or a Trekkie convention or something like that, you're like, oh, my people. Yeah. But at the same time, you're like, but I'm a social introvert. I have social anxiety. How do I do this? So you have to tackle your discomfort and go do that thing. And what you end up realizing is by blocking yourself off, you're making it worse. And by actually just dive in and recognize that it'll probably be okay.
Yeah.
Let it go. And then all of a sudden you're just getting all the love from all the people at the convention, and I'll try not to cry when talking about that kind of thing. But anyway, but so that's I think that a lot of people can probably relate to the struggle of dealing with all kinds of discomfort, and it means something to different people.
Exactly. So your idea of discomfort as a person with chronic pain might be really different from the discomfort of somebody that has, like you said, social anxiety. So it might be physical pain. It might be, metaphorical pain. It might be some kind of suffering. But we were talking earlier about trying to suppress whatever that is, push it down. That usually 100% of the time always leads to more suffering or more pain and whatever that thing is, whether it's physical or mental or emotional or whatever.
And so talking about the concept of sitting with discomfort, though, so the difference between suppressing it and sitting with it, so let's just talk about, I think an obvious thing would be physical pain. So if I'm literally sitting in a cross-legged position in lotus with everything folded in my knees and ankles and all sorts of stuff. So sitting with whether or not, is this pain injurious? And literally think of all the metaphors and deeper meanings that you can possibly take from even a physical example of sitting with discomfort, but is my knee actually going to pop, or is this a nice stretch?
Right.
Your knee actually might pop in lotus pose, so let's avoid lotus a little bit. But then sitting with being with the discomfort of the physical pain, and then also your brain saying, you got to get out of this, you got to get out of this, when knowing that, let's say, okay, finally, I'm probably going to hurt my knee, so I'm going to readjust my legs. Okay, I've released that discomfort, that pain. Now, I've got discomfort from sitting in one position for a long time.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm sitting with my own thoughts.
Oh, yeah. I actually just read a book about this, and I'll have to go back and figure out what it was so we can put it in the notes. But it was talking about the brain and body, and how our brain, and this was mostly relating to people who run marathons or ultra marathons, things like that. The brain will tell the body that it is done way before the body is actually done.
Yeah.
Because we have this built-in mechanism to preserve our energy. So that's a kind of interesting thing to look at, too. So sometimes the brain will tell, or your body will tell your brain. I think I reversed that. Your body will tell your brain.
That makes sense.
Way ahead of time.
Yeah.
That it's starting to fatigue. So if you're in a yin class, especially, yin is a really good example because the poses are held a very long time and they're very deep holds, very deep stretches. Your body might tell your brain within the first minute that you're done, that it's too much, that you're fatigued. So you have to kind of really focus on those feelings of injury versus discomfort, mild discomfort versus actual pain. So I always like to say pinching or feelings of stabbing or throbbing.
Sharp stabbing pain is bad.
Yeah, that's usually how I try to distinguish that. Because that's, I think, a really, really tricky thing to add into that whole mix of discomfort. So when we say discomfort, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
No.
Because I can tell you that, like, even right now, so I worked out this morning and I'm just sitting with my legs crossed. My hips are telling me that I need to, like, get up and walk around. They're not hurting. It's not painful, but I'm sitting in a position that's a stretch. But I'm going to sit with it because
we got to do this.
I'm a grown-up and I need to sit still sometimes, and I'm okay with that. So being able to decipher between, okay, this is just uncomfortable and I feel a stabbing, pinching pain in my hip joint.
Yeah.
That's, I don't know. I don't know if that convolutes it more. I think I need to, or we need to explain a little bit better, because I think people that are newer to yoga really struggle with this. If they're less familiar with bodily sensation of discomfort or pain, they might have a hard time distinguishing. Like, I know.
I agree. And I think that's where, just ask.
Yeah.
I would say, and that's, going back to the conversation of it, the community. And it was funny, like, as you were saying that, I was thinking, like, how do you make a yoga class a community other than there, a handful of people in a class together? Mm-hmm. Recognizing that you're not an island.
Yeah.
As you like to say, you're not a hostage to your pose. And so ask the teacher, like, okay, I feel this in my hip.
Yeah.
Is this injurious? And then let's talk about, well, what does that mean?
And
if you don't know, ask.
It could be, especially in a group setting, if you bring that up, there is somebody else next to you that was thinking the same thing.
And somebody will ask a question. I can see the person next to them, their shoulders drop, like, oh my God, finally,
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for asking.
Yes.
Yeah.
Plus, maybe you're also going to distract the teacher. Yeah. And, like, we'll get out of the pose faster.
Or
you won't get out of the pose faster.
No, you'll probably be stuck in it longer if you get, especially if you get one of us talking about it.
But it'll distract you. Oh my God, can you imagine? We do teach yin too. So come to our classes. It'll be fun.
And if I'm in it, I'll make it worse. You're going to be there for like 20 minutes. No, don't. I'm sorry.
Dear God. So this is a great segue to talk about brain injury.
Oh yeah, I guess it is.
I need to get my water bottle. So are you ready? Do you want to tell your story?
I will tell my story. I've told my story before, and I don't think we were yoga rebels at that time. Yeah. I think I've told it a couple times, but in different contexts. So at this point, almost exactly 2 years ago, I got a call on my phone from my husband's phone number, and I answered it, and it was not my husband. It was somebody at Riverside Hospital telling me that my husband had been in a motorcycle accident. So right there, not exactly what I had planned to hear. And one of the things that, I guess maybe like trigger warning if people have a difficult time hearing about like injuries or death or things like that, we're going to talk a little bit about both. But I won't get into like any gory details or anything like that, but just FYI. And one of the things that I think a lot of people don't realize is if the ER calls you and the person is in very, very bad condition, they won't tell you on the phone how they're doing. Mm. They just tell you that you need to get there. And that's so that you don't drive recklessly and speed and maybe kill somebody in the process. So
that makes sense.
I was pretty much just told he's alive.
Okay.
You need to get here now. So I got there, and he had been hit on his motorcycle by a car. He was not awake. He was in a coma. I guess at the time he had been dead at the actual scene of the accident. They found him. They got him into the ambulance, and he somehow
came back.
He came back. When they found him, he didn't have a pulse. He wasn't breathing. He was essentially...
Seems dead to me.
Dead. I mean, so they were able to intubate him because he woke up just enough, I guess, that they realized that he was. So that turned into several months of him being in a coma and in the hospital, and then waking up and going through these various stages of traumatic brain injury, which I've talked about a little teeny bit here and there, but every brain injury is different. But for anybody that goes into a coma, there's this scale for recovery. It's called the Rancho Scale of Recovery, and it's based on a place in a hospital in Texas. hence Rancho.
Rancho.
The Rancho scale, and it's 1 to 10. It's different levels of recovery, but each level is essentially like a developmental level of a human being. So when the person's at a 1, they might be following movement with their eyes. They might be moving a little bit. If they're at a 2, they might be speaking a little bit. So it goes through all these things. So I had to watch my husband basically like go through all of these stages where he didn't know who I was. He didn't know who his family was. He couldn't move. He was, from head to toe, like broken bones and things like that. But it led to very, very quickly, I would say, it started more of like an acute stress disorder. So in me. So in terms of trauma, there are a lot of different things that can happen. So everybody has different levels of resiliency. So some people could experience the same traumas and they'll be fine. Other people might experience it and they could have what is called an acute stress response. So they have a lot of the symptoms of PTSD. So they're not sleeping. They might be having nightmares. They might be hypervigilant. So like loud sounds bother them, things like that, but it goes away. If it goes on for a few weeks, months, then it typically will become post-traumatic stress disorder, which is what I landed on because this process was just very, very traumatic. And one of the things that I noticed as I was going through this process was that I couldn't do yoga. It was so triggering for me to be in my body because I was so hypervigilant. Like sounds, lights, shifts in temperature even were so triggering to me. And it happened in the summer. So if I got in my car and my car was very hot, I would go into fight or flight that I was going to somehow die of heat exhaustion just because it was really warm. So, and I was telling Burgundy about this too. I was in such a state of fight or flight that yoga, getting back to yoga, was full of suffering. So an example I gave was I took a class with Burgundy and she uses the Shavasana mask. So like little, do you have like rice bags in there? So it's like this nice amount of pressure and you can just put it over your eyes when you are lying in Shavasana, which is like your final resting pose. And I couldn't handle having anything covering my eyes because I felt so unsafe. And then as I forced myself to have the eye mask on for all of Shavasana, as I forced myself to sit with my eyes closed or sit with certain poses like hip openers especially, I began to notice that I could do it a little bit longer and a little bit longer and a little bit longer and a little bit longer. But had I... And I'm not saying that if anybody ever tries to push down suffering that they're like weaker than me or anything like that. But I'm just saying as somebody that practiced yoga before and practiced yoga during an actual, experience of post-traumatic stress disorder, I was able to see my resilience increasing because I was sitting with my suffering. So I just realized one day, I can put the Shavasana mask on and I can keep it on. Or, I can close my eyes at the beginning to meditate. Or, I can take a deep breath and I don't feel like my chest is, caving in on me. So through sitting with that discomfort, through emotional and sometimes physical pain, I was able to decrease overall symptoms. And now it's like 2 years later and I go to restorative every week. When that mask comes around, I'm like, bring it on. I'm ready to sleep. I don't care that other people are around me. So I'm not saying that like my experience was typical or anything like that, but I really would say that, and I don't know what made me do it. Like, I don't know if I'm like a glutton for punishment or what the deal is. Like, I don't know what the thing is that made me want to sit through the suffering, but I didn't want to suffer. And I guess just because of my yoga knowledge and background and experience, I kind of knew that was what it was going to take.
So were you like so this whole sitting with discomfort thing, because I'd like to also liken that to like, a situation where you go into a place that is completely uncomfortable for you because maybe it's a social situation or whatever. So if I were to sit with my discomfort, I'm recognizing that, I'm feeling a panic attack.
Yeah.
Right? Where do I feel it? Okay, it's maybe getting my breath and things like that. So is that the kind of thing that when you're talking about like you sitting with your discomfort, were you recognizing that the Shavasana mask made you feel uncomfortable and then just accepting it? I mean, because I'm wondering, like,
acceptance. It's an acceptance, and it's actually, I think part of it was also just as I was learning about counseling techniques too. At the same time, I was able to recognize what I was doing, because that's one of the ways that some counselors will work with people that do have panic attacks, is to teach them how to sit with it.
Yeah.
How to label it, just like a meditation.
Yeah.
If you're actually having a panic attack, first of all, remind yourself that you're not dying, but then to actually sit and name the experiences that you're having. It's like it takes its power away.
Yeah.
Because another example, at that same time, I couldn't go grocery shopping for like a year because I was at the grocery store when I got the call on my phone.
Oh.
So I just couldn't do it. So there were a few times that I actually went to the store, put the things in my cart or my basket, went to check out. Panic attack started, I would leave without my stuff.
Oh, wow.
So it was very serious. So this practice of forcing myself to do some of these things, it's called exposure therapy in the counseling world, but that's the stuff that's the kind of discomfort. The kind of discomfort where you're not going to get hurt.
Yeah.
You're not going to actually die, even though your brain might be telling you you're going to die. It's the kind of discomfort that I am talking about in this scenario. It's the discomfort of like the lights in here are too bright, so my brain is telling me that I'm in danger. Yeah. And then going, wait a minute.
They're not going to kill me.
That's not how that works.
Yeah.
But it took time. It took a lot of time. And I think that's another thing that's counterintuitive to our culture, is that we want things to happen quickly. So sitting with discomfort is not as much fun as like the idea of sitting and meditating and just feeling bliss the whole time, which is what most people will expect, and why they think they're doing it wrong if they try meditation and they don't feel blissful and calm, and
or even yoga. I mean, people in general.
Oh,
think that, you know, it's just going to be blissful. I mean, you can have an expectation for a lot of things, and you know, and also, again, I mean, kind of. I'm kind of weaving this into just thoughts of how some of our viewers might experience things. Like, it seems like going to some event would be really exciting, or going to this thing would be really exciting, and then you have all of these ideas about what it's going to be like and all this stuff, and then you get there and you're like, oh God, there's so many people. I don't know where I'm supposed to go. I don't even know where the parking lot is. Like all of this stuff. But recognizing that, you know, if you take your time, go slow, you know, okay, yeah, you're confused about where the parking lot is. That's fine. Add a couple of minutes to figure it out. You know, like the event, no, it may not wait for you, but you're not going to miss out on everything. Take your time. You know, all of these things, like, and if, like, your costume busts or something, you know, like, well, you bring some safety pins. Think ahead.
Always bring safety pins, I'm going to say, no matter what you're doing.
Really, truly. Like, safety pins are the stuff of life. Like, keep it together with safety pins.
Yeah. We are not sponsored by safety pins.
No.
But we wouldn't mind, I guess.
Yes. Mr. Safety Pin or Mrs. Safety Pin.
It's a family.
Yeah. But that's the thing. Like, having an expectation that it's going to be blissful or whatever, and then it's not.
Right.
Because not a lot of things are. I mean, even when I've gone to, like, retreats or things where the picture looks beautiful, you know, you go on this vacation or whatever, and then it's, well, the reality is that you still have all this herky-jerky, you know, life stuff that has to happen before you can get to, like, the beautiful beach spot. You know, you got to walk through all the annoying tourists to get to the beach and all these things. Well, you just got to accept that life's going to happen, the discomfort of life.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, and I guess Buddhism is a big part of yoga. They're like all enmeshed, but just that attachment piece, I mean, literally, that's like Buddhism 101 is attachment leads to suffering. Right. And I love this Haruki Murakami quote, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Yep. That's one of my favorite quotes by him. He's a really good author if you have not read any of his books. But our attachment to a specific outcome, which we've talked about a lot at this point, is usually what leads to the unnecessary suffering or the unnecessary pain or anguish or whatever the thing is.
And just, simply like, you can't change life. You can't control life, but you can control your response to life.
Exactly. And that's the other piece of just building resilience and being stronger and being, I guess that in itself is a discipline as well. Just realizing that you can, and not in a, I don't know. Sometimes when I say things like that, people think that I'm being very nihilistic, and I'm really not. Like when I say things are temporary and that it's not a big deal.
It's for real.
But it's just true. It's just fact. But I don't find that to be sad or, I don't know. I don't really see anything wrong with nihilism, but I just think it's kind of liberating to realize those things.
Everything is temporary.
Yeah. I mean, and
everything's in flux.
I mean, even things like tattoos. I've had people say to me before, maybe people that don't like tattoos or whatever, it's like, that's on you for the rest of your body. I'm like, is it?
Not really.
I mean, not really. There are all kinds of things you could do. You could get a cover-up of that tattoo. You could get it lasered off. You could scratch it and destroy it because you scraped it too hard. I mean, that absolutely nothing is permanent. So I think that's really liberating. And when I think of sitting with discomfort, that's another piece that I have in my mind, is that almost everything is temporary. So whatever that feeling is, whether it's an actual back to the panic attack thing or if it's pain, it's temporary. So yeah, everything is temporary, and that's kind of wonderful.
I think it is.
I think it's soothing in a way.
I agree. And so about how long do you feel like so your story, your PTSD went away?
I would say it's mostly gone. I can go to the grocery store. I can handle extreme temperatures now. I haven't had a panic attack in long enough that I can't remember the last panic attack I have. Like there's a test, like any other disorder, there's an assessment for it, and I didn't meet any of the criteria the last time. You're not supposed to test yourself, but like I just did it anyway. I was just like looking through the DSM-5 because sometimes I just get curious about that stuff. So I was looking through the Diagnostics and Statistics Manual. That's like the counselor Bible mostly for insurance purposes, if we're honest, to kind of diagnose people. And I was looking through all of the criteria for PTSD, and I was like, no, maybe, but no, for most of it.
That's awesome.
I mean, it took a while, and I know there are a lot of people who did not necessarily have I'm going to call it a luxury, or I'm going to call it luxury of having like a place to practice yoga and people around them and those kinds of supports, because there are people out there that could have gone through something like this and would still be suffering every day just because they did not have the tools in their toolbox. They weren't in school for social work, so they didn't have a class on trauma to understand what was going on. So,
and you asked for help.
And I asked for a lot of help. I asked for tons of help. From lots of different people, with different experiences and perspectives, and I don't really know. I think maybe just because I'm older now, and just because I don't know, I've been through some stuff already. I'm still looking back. I'm like, I can't believe I asked all those people for help.
Yeah,
but that was what made the difference. Like, I didn't do any of this on my own.
No, that takes a lot of courage. Like even the notion of sitting with discomfort, although it's you sitting in your own body with your own thoughts, but you had other people helping you to figure out what all that was and to give you some tools and help with all that.
I was very open too. Like, I think sometimes people worry about oversharing, or they don't like oversharers. So I kind of just was really mindful of who I was talking to about what, because there are just certain people, if you tell them like, yeah, I haven't slept in several days because I have nightmares, they're gonna kind of go, oh, I don't know what to say. But you know who those people are that will say, oh, that's tell me more about that, or just whatever the thing is. So I just was super open about it, or if I was, gonna go somewhere and I started having a panic attack, I would text, the person I was gonna meet and say, I'm having a panic attack right now, can we do this later, or whatever. And it didn't give the panic attack permission to like take over my life, but just letting other people know what was going on made everything a lot easier to deal with, I think, because I wasn't suppressing anything. I think that was a big piece of it, was just being brutally honest with people. Even like at the time, my coworkers, like there were a few days where I would go in and I couldn't do it. Like I think I went back to work, like, and I was like, all right, I gotta work. And I was working with people with mental illnesses. So I was working with people that might have had a brain injury or that might have like a personality disorder. And they're just like, all their stuff is coming onto me, and I didn't know what to do. So I would have to say, you know what, I need to go home early. And I was able to tell them why. And nobody gave me a hard time. Nobody fired me. I know there are places where that could happen. But I think just because I was so... And just being in social work too. Yeah. You tell, if you're a social worker and you tell another social worker that you need a mental health day, like unless they're really in a bad spot, they're probably going to be like, yeah, go home, because you're not going to be helpful to other people if you don't take care of yourself. So,
and that's really important. I mean, taking care of yourself just in life in general, but but we talk about this in yoga, we talk about this in Western culture. Mostly we talk about in Western culture, because in a lot of other cultures, it's you will take care of yourself. You recognize
it's just what you do.
Yeah, that's part of the whole thing. I was reading a book that was talking about how in Tibetan there is no word for self-compassion, or self-care. There's also not a word for self-loathing.
Wow.
And when they talk about compassion, it's implied that they're talking about themselves as well. Like the practice of metta, for example, it's just implied that you want yourself to be happy and healthy and all that stuff because you're have to take care of yourself. Yeah. And so it is important to do those little things to take care of yourself, because you are part of a community, whether you'd like to acknowledge it or not, whether you realize it or not. You are part of this big organism, and whether or not people actually like rely on you, I don't want to put like responsibility on somebody.
Right, yeah, it's not meant like
it's
that.
not that, but like you are part of something, and there are people there, probably a lot of people that actually want to help you. I know there are some people that are not very good at that. They think they're not good at helping.
Yeah.
But, it's kind of like what Mr. Rogers said.
Look for the helpers.
Look for the helpers.
Yeah, it's really true. And a lot of times they'll find you. I was very surprised by the people that found me as I was going through that traumatic time. People that I maybe knew or that were acquaintances that were just reaching out to cook dinner for me or let my dogs out if I had to go to the hospital. And it was just coming from a lot of different places and from unexpected people as well. Maybe people that I just kind of sort of knew. It was just very interesting, because there was a lot of me asking for help, but there was a lot of help that just kind of appeared, which was interesting. And somebody pointed out to me at that time, I was like, this is so weird, I don't know what to think of this. And they're like, well, you help other people, so like they're helping you now.
Right.
And I had a hard time like wrapping my head around that. I'm like,
accepting help.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, you're right. If this happened to somebody else, I would be doing what they're doing now. So it was kind of like people are like, they're like paying it back or paying it forward or whatever the thing is.
Because people enjoy helping other people, I think. And because when I help you, I get something from it. I get the satisfaction, that feeling of, oh, I'm helping Lauren.
I know, yeah. I love helping my friends.
Yeah, and so being in the position to accept help, that's also very important, because if I want to help you, that's my gift to you. And it is a big thing, and it can take a lot of courage to actually say, yes, you know what, I would actually love it if you could let my dogs out. That little thing would make a big difference, because that takes the stress off of you and things like that. And so that's an idea, like, to help people, it's not a whole lot. You don't have to give them $1 million. You don't have to like house sit for a week.
No.
You just go over for 20 minutes and let the dogs out.
Yeah, and that kind of stuff, I was just, it's so funny. That was the stuff that I was the most blown away by. I was like, wow.
And it's nice that it would occur to somebody like, I don't know, can I just, feed your fish?
Yeah.
Something? I mean, that's nice stuff.
Yeah, and that's the kind of stuff that I would do. Like when people, I don't know, like I know when people have had things happen to them, like I'm like, oh, I'm going to go check on them and make sure they're okay, see what they need. So why would other people not do that? I don't know. It's just a weird disconnect.
And it can be an email. It doesn't have to be like in person, because if you're weirded out and if you're uncomfortable by that, that's fine. Even some form of little contact with another person.
Yeah.
But I think one of the important things, though, is to point out, though, that you didn't just live in a bubble, because people wouldn't just guess that something was wrong or going on with you. You did have to put it out there saying, like, this shit's going on in my life.
Yeah.
And therefore, so you can't just assume that people are going to know and just out of the blue, like, hey, I don't know if there's anything going on with you, but can you let your dog out? That's weird.
Do you want me to randomly cook dinner for you for one person?
That'd be weird. So you kind of got to let it out into the universe.
Yeah.
Which
like, was
this
really
is
hard.
going on.
Yeah. That was probably the hardest thing for me. And then I realized it wasn't that hard after a while. I was like, oh, this is actually preferable.
Right. And I kind of experienced that. So like with my mom, so I guess we're kind of sliding into my story. Like when my mom was going through like 7 years of decline through dementia, that was the hard part. It wasn't her death. That actually released my suffering.
Yeah.
Because all the time up through it, although I was crying a lot or whatever, I was crying in private.
Yeah.
And like, so Aaron was the only person that got the brunt of all of my stuff. So he was my only support, which is unfair to him. And I didn't really talk about it much to other people. I was like, oh, no, I'm doing great. Yeah, of course I am.
Yeah, I got it all together.
I practice yoga. Of course I'm good at this. It was such BS.
We all do that, yeah.
And what happened, though, was I was drinking an awful lot of wine.
Yeah.
And although I was practicing I had my yoga practice, meditating, I was running, I was doing all the things that I normally would, but all of my normal things took a lot more effort because I was holding it all inside. And my body was exhausted because mourning, even before she died, I was still mourning. I was mourning the loss of my mother. That takes a lot of energy.
Yes.
Suffering and being sad and all of that takes so much effort.
Right. Like so trying not to cry. Think of if
yes.
you need to cry and you're trying not to cry. It's like, it hurts.
And doing that for like years.
Yeah.
And so like it built up in my body. I got more injuries. That's when I broke my foot. That's when I pulled my muscles and like all of that stuff. And then my body, like all over my body hurt. It hurt to walk on the grass. And then finally, and this sounds terrible, but this is what I write about in the book that I wrote about my mom. Like when she died, I finally was like, well, I can't not acknowledge the fact that my mom died. So everybody knows now, poof, it's all there. And that gave me sort of the permission to like, let it go and ask for help and accept help. And it was hard for me because I am a very independent person.
Yeah.
And so I like to do things on my own, and just sort of plow through it and do all the stuff and whatever. Same. But that's hard. And so finally, I guess from my story, I did not sit with the discomfort. I'm the complete opposite. I was ignoring it. I was avoiding it. I wrote a whole bunch.
Yeah.
And I even started the book that I'm still working on. I started a fantasy version of my experience because I just wanted to get away.
Yeah.
And so, complete avoidance to the point of like writing a whole nother universe that had a whole different story version of this. And so finally, when I was able to really sit with it, and I remember one of the things that actually helped, one of my students, Betty, hi, Betty, I hope you're watching this actually. Like a couple days later after my mom died, she came over to my house and sat on my porch. And one of the first things she asked me was, she goes, so have you had the dream about your mom yet? And I'm like, no, like it was so blunt. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, no, I haven't. That's actually one of my things is that I haven't dreamed about her.
Yeah.
And it was cool when somebody was just like, this is just the reality of what you deal with all of this stuff. And it felt so good to just be like open and honest. Mm-hmm. And that kind of like released it. And I also do remember like at my mom's funeral, my friend Victor comes up to me. And he was the one person, like everybody else comes in, they're like, oh, how you doing or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I'm fine. Here, let me show you this thing over here. He comes up and he goes, Burg, how are you doing? And I'm like, so I like just poured it out on him. And he was the one that actually helped me walk up and actually see my mom's body because I avoided that too. Like my whole story is all about the complete avoidance of discomfort.
I mean, it is and it isn't. The one thing that I see in common between both of these stories is how long we both waited to ask people for help.
Yes.
And we waited until an actual, like, tragedy of some kind or serious traumatic event. So I guess that would be maybe, like, a takeaway for people that are watching, because everybody's been through some kind of trauma. So maybe, like, if possible, don't be like us and wait until something so intense happens to ask for help. Like it can be something smaller. It could be something that is not so life altering before you ask other people to be part of your world, even like to let people in. And that's a tough one for me. I think it's probably tough for you, just like being introverted. It's like, I'm gonna sit over here.
It's a whole lot easier
with my books and my silence, and my cat is probably there, and I don't need anything because if I ask for something, then that invites in more conversations. And I just like need you to also stop talking.
and that's the funny thing. Like just as you were saying that, I was thinking like it may not be so much. It may not have been my fear of asking for help. It's just actually talking to somebody.
That was part of it too. The fact that like being vulnerable is scary. Yeah. For probably most people, Brene Brown's a really good source for reading about vulnerability. That's
I still need to get her books.
That is what she studies. She's like, whenever I've been making this joke lately that I can't, like, if I at some point tell anybody that I'm going to go back to school for my PhD in social work to like throw me off a bridge because like I don't have the emotional ability to do that, and I think I'm going to tap out on student loans at some point. But if anybody were to get their PhD in social work, it would be to be like Brene Brown, who studies vulnerability and shame and all of those things that we try to avoid. And if you haven't read her books, I definitely recommend Daring Greatly is a really good one. The Gifts of Imperfection is a really good one. But she's all about leaning into that shit, like leaning into being vulnerable, telling people how you're feeling because the outcome is so worth the discomfort, which it is. You're not alone. I have to vouch for that just based on my experience that the discomfort of being vulnerable and telling people really uncomfortable things and personal things ended up benefiting me tremendously. And then I ended up actually increasing my little bubble by adding people into it, which is not what I expected from that at all. So yeah.
And now you've got this podcast.
And that's a big part of it. For real. It seriously is. And I have built up these, I've built myself up out of this in a way that was so bizarre.
And you're expressing your nerd stuff too. You talked about this
oh my God, I can't shut up. It's like somebody it's like floodgates of nerddom now. Because I feel like I can finally let it all out because I try to keep my nerdiness in somewhat unless I know somebody else is also a nerd, and then even then I kind of hold back.
And that I think creates suffering in itself.
It does. I feel like I can't be myself.
Keeping it hidden. I'm just but I want to talk about all these things. I love all these people that love all this Star Wars, and I just want to hug everybody. I
know. It's like missing out on a chunk of life that can make everything better.
Yeah, your nerd family.
Yeah, it's been good. Like I have my little Chun-Li here. I was
big legs.
I was telling
Big
Burgundy about, being a kid and growing up with a brother and mostly having guy friends and playing Street Fighter 2 when Street Fighter 2 came out and just lamenting that there was only one female character. But she taught me so much. But I was just realizing that I was just like spouting out all of my knowledge of like Street Fighter 2, Street Fighter 2 Turbo, and I was like, oh, this feels like I'm letting my shoulders drop down to talk about this with somebody, because this is the kind of stuff I think about and I tell my husband about, because he thinks it's great to be married to a nerd. He thinks it's like the coolest thing ever, and he doesn't understand like how I exist. And I'm like, I don't know.
Magic.
I don't know how I do it either. It's so great. But it's like I just feel like my whole body just like relaxes when I can be myself in that way, and that's been really cool.
Yeah, I agree. Like I really enjoy. Because I can tell the difference when I sit around people who don't have a nerd thing.
Yeah,
and I can
tell.
You can see their sort of like their discomfort, so they get to sit with their discomfort. Yes, and they're just sort of like, I'm so happy for you. I don't understand anything you're talking about.
Wow, you must really like that. It's almost like they want to pat you on the head a little bit. Like,
nice.
Good for you, sweetie.
But here's the thing, though. Like, what I think is in expressing your passion for whatever it is. Like, in this sphere, we're talking about yoga. We're talking about nerd stuff. And in expressing your passions, though, you're also giving... you're giving that other person permission. You're setting an example to say, look, this is what it's like to show passion and excitement for something. And maybe they will be, I don't want people to be envious, but maybe they'll be envious and they'll be like, oh my God, like I want to love something as much as they do,
Yeah.
So then they might seek something out, or they might be like, hey, tell me more about aliens.
Yeah.
Tell me more about Ripley. Or they might be like, who's Jonesy? Well.
Yeah, I am really excited. So just as a side note, so we didn't talk about it because May 4th was kind of like a really big deal, but May 6th is like Alien Day since 2016, because that's in the very first Alien as a significant number. And so since 2016, there's been an Alien Day, and this was the official Alien Day 2019 shirt that was available. It's like official Alien merchandise. But we were talking about resiliency and discipline, and kind of Jonesy is a really good poster child for that, because Jonesy makes it through all of that stuff somehow ends up managing to hang on despite, an entire crew minus Ripley dying, and then another crew, and then another crew.
Badass cat.
Yeah, Ripley's like the poster cat for for discipline and being through all, like, the worst things ever. So significant discomfort. And cats don't really like discomfort.
No, I do have to share a quick story. So the other day, Aaron's out back, and all of a sudden, and I'm in the front of the upper front of the house, and all of a sudden I hear him go, oh my God. And I run out, and I'm like, what's going on? And he's videotaping, like you do. Any kind of thing that happens, you record it now. Our cat had just jumped into the pond, completely like dunked herself. She's this little tuxedo cat.
Teeny.
She's a little girl. And she has seizures, so she's got some sort of neurological issue going on anyway. So she jumps in, had to paddle herself out of our pond, and she's drenched. And she was just like talking about sitting with her discomfort. Like, she's drenched, and she talks a lot, but this time she was not talking. Aaron's like, Sarah, what'd you do? Did you jump in the pond? She's just like licking herself, like, completely. Don't look at me. I'm horrid. And she didn't talk for like hours. Anyway,
oh my God,
that was my
poor little thing.
Yes. Anyway, so I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please click like or subscribe.
I say do both.
I do too. So Patreon, go to patreon.com/yoga rebels. You can join us as well, and we'd love you to do that. So before we head out, keep the rebellion alive.